The imposing Gothic architecture of the prestigious St. Jude Academy stands like an isolated fortress against the damp, mist-shrouded hills of New England, its ancient stone towers and endless corridors echoing with centuries of rigorous academic discipline. Within these formidable walls, tradition is an unyielding religion, and reputation is everything. At the absolute peak of this rigid hierarchy rules Diana Morgan. At 35 years old, Diana is the youngest rector in the Academy's history, a brilliant, fiercely intimidating administrator whose entire existence is forged from acceptable control. Always impeccably dressed in charcoal gray bespoke suits, pristine silk button-downs, and polished leather heels, with her dark hair drawn back into a severe, flawless chignon, and a chilling, calculative gaze behind rimless glasses, she operates with the precision of an executioner. To the Board of Trustees and the elite student body alike, Diana is an untouchable symbol of academic perfection. She demands total conformity, flawless attendance, and absolute subordination from everyone beneath her authority, until the chaotic, untamed anomaly of her new stepsister shatters the peaceful monotony of the campus. Rose. At 21 years old, Rose is a walking, breathing declaration of war against everything St. Jude Academy stands for. With her battered leather jacket thrown carelessly over a faded band t-shirt, messy dark curls tumbling across her forehead, and a permanent razor-sharp smirk of utter disdain plastered across her face, Rose treats the historic halls like a third-rate holding pen. She regularly skips mandatory chapel lectures, leaves charcoal smudges and oil paint stains across the antique oak tables of the Grand Library, and openly mocks the archaic rules that the rest of the student body obeys out of sheer terror. Their first public collision under the austere gaze of the faculty sets the tone for a brutal, high-stakes psychological war. It happens on a damp, slate-gray Friday afternoon in the historic main lecture hall, just as the Board of Trustees is conducting its weekly inspection. The towering room is packed with influential alumni, wealthy donors, and senior faculty members sitting in stiff rows of velvet chairs. The heavy oak doors swing open with a loud, echoing bang, and Rose strolls casually into the center aisle. She wears her scuffed boots, chewing gum with a lazy rhythm, a massive canvas duffel bag slung over one shoulder, completely ignoring the sea of shocked faces turned in her direction. She is 20 minutes late to the rector's formal address. Diana, standing at the elevated mahogany podium with her notes neatly aligned, freezes mid-sentence. Her posture instantly locks into a rigid, glacial stillness. Slowly, deliberately, she removes her glasses, placing them beside her papers with a quiet click that resonates horribly through the silent hall. A heavy, suffocating wave of pure, concentrated fury rushes through Diana's veins. "Miss Miller?" Diana's voice cuts across the vast lecture hall like a diamond-edged scalpel, smooth, perfectly controlled, and vibrating with an icy, suppressed wrath that makes the air turn sub-zero. It is customary at St. Jude Academy to arrive before the address has concluded, unless, of course, your inability to read a clock is a chronic symptom of your general intellectual deficiency. A few nervous titters ripple through the back rows of students, instantly silenced by a withering glance from the rector. Rose stops dead in her tracks. Instead of shrinking back in embarrassment or offering a compliant apology, she slowly turns her head, sliding her hands deep into the pockets of her leather jacket. A lazy, incredibly insolent smirk spreads across her face as she meets Diana's freezing gray eyes dead on. "Oh, relax, Madam Rector," Rose drawls, her voice carrying effortlessly across the historic room, dripping with an arrogant mockery that drives Diana straight to the edge of sanity. Traffic through the gates was a little brutal. Didn't realize the entire upper crust committee needed to hold a moment of silence just because I decided to grace you with my presence. A collective gasp echoes among the elderly trustees. Faces turn crimson with shock at the blatant, unprecedented insubordination. Diana's jaw tightens so hard that a muscle twitches in her pale cheek. Every single instinct of her disciplined, calculated existence screams at her to crush this insolent girl into dust. Without breaking eye contact, Diana steps away from the podium, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor as she descends the steps toward the aisle, closing the distance between them with terrifying speed. She stops mere inches from Rose, towering over her despite the slight height difference, her voice dropping to a low, venomous whisper, intended only for her ears. In this institution, I am the singular law. Diana breathes, her gray eyes boring straight into Rose's defiant soul. You think your little rebellious act makes you impressive? It makes you a liability. Starting today, your studio privileges are permanently revoked. Every free hour you have will be spent in my private study, memorizing the Academy's disciplinary bylaws, word for word. You will break your arrogant attitude piece by piece, or I will personally ensure your name is permanently barred from every higher institution in the country. Do you understand me? Rose's smirk falters for a fraction of a second, replaced by a sudden, sharp, dangerous spark in her dark eyes. She doesn't back down an inch, tilting her chin up to meet the challenge head-on. Try it, stepsister, Rose whispers back, her voice husky and challenging. But you might just find out that locking me up only gives me more time to burn your precious rules to the ground. Diana turns on her heel and marches back to the stage with flawless, rigid posture. But beneath her immaculate wool suit, her heart is hammering a frantic, erratic rhythm. The war for the shared legacy has officially begun, and neither of them realizes that this brutal collision of cold authority and raw fire is dragging them straight toward an irrevocable precipice. The acoustic landscape of the historic New England boarding school at midnight is defined by a sharp, oppressive silence. The measured, rhythmic clack-clack of Diana's heels echoing against the ancient oak parquet of the upper corridors. The low, ominous, vibrating hum of a late autumn storm howling against the towering stained glass windows of the library, and the soft, repetitive scratching of charcoal against paper echoing from the shadows of the abandoned art wing. It is past midnight. The campus is entirely asleep, shrouded in a dense blanket of mountain fog and pouring rain. Diana had intended to spend the late hours reviewing quarterly disciplinary reports in her private office. Instead, walking past the damp, unheated corridor of the old East Studio wing, she notices a thin, unauthorized sliver of yellow light spilling out from beneath the heavy oak doors. A sharp, unmistakable scent of raw turpentine, linseed oil, and graphite hangs heavily in the air. Diana freezes. Her posture instantly locks into rigid, glacial stillness. She pushes the door open without a sound and steps into the vast, shadowed studio, her grey eyes narrowing into dangerous slits as she takes in the scene. Scattered across the historic drafting tables are dozens of unauthorized sketches, brilliant, biting caricatures of the Academy's corrupt board members, alongside raw, emotive charcoal portraits that capture the cold, suffocating pressure of the institution. In the center of the room, sitting cross-legged on a paint-splattered wooden stool, in her battered leather jacket, is Rose, furiously dragging a piece of charcoal across a fresh sheet of heavy paper, a pair of worn headphones resting around her neck. A slow, terrifying wave of pure, concentrated fury rushes through Diana's veins. Without a word of warning, Diana closes the distance across the studio with frightening speed. She reaches out, snatches the sketchpad directly out of Rose's hands with brutal force, and before the younger girl can even react, Diana grabs her by the collar of her jacket, hauling her to her feet. With calculated, relentless aggression, Diana marches her backward out of the studio and slams her firmly against the heavy wood-paneled walls of the dark corridor, caging her in by planting one slender, manicured hand flat against the oak shelf right beside Rose's shoulder. The air in the narrow hallway instantly turns electric. Diana leans in close, her face mere inches from Rose's, her gray eyes computing with an intense, unadulterated ice that could shatter glass. "You are testing my patience past its absolute limit, Rose." Diana's voice is a low, venomous whisper, vibrating with suppressed rage as she checks each word against the quiet air. These unauthorized drawings, this reckless defiance. You are actively mocking everything this institution stands for. And more importantly, you are making a mockery of our family name. One more stunt like this, and I will personally draft your expulsion papers, with every mark of professional incompetence permanently stamped on your record. Do you understand me? The physical proximity is suffocating. The scent of expensive wool and cold rain mixes with the sharp, raw smell of charcoal clinging to Rose's skin. A lesser student would have shrunk back in terror under the devastating weight of the rector's wrath, trembling beneath her freezing gaze. Rose doesn't flinch. Despite being trapped against the corridor wall by the most powerful, unyielding authority figure in the academy, Rose's lips slowly curve upward into a lazy, incredibly insolent smirk. Her dark eyes flash with a reckless, untamed defiance, staring straight into Diana's furious face as if inviting total catastrophe. Slowly, deliberately, ignoring the threat of immediate destruction, Rose raises her hand. Her ink-stained fingers slide upward, lightly tracing the back of Diana's hand, where it rests flat against the wooden shelf, creating a slow, friction-filled movement that sends a visible, violent shiver straight down Diana's rigid spine. Rose tilts her head upward, letting her breath brush dangerously close to Diana's ear, before whispering in a low, husky, mocking drawl. "You know, Diana, for someone who claims to despise my existence, you sure spend an awful lot of midnight hours hunting me down just to pin me against a wall and remind me how closely you're watching." Diana's breath catches sharply in her throat. The sheer, unadulterated audacity hits her like a physical blow. Her fingers tighten automatically against the wood, her heart hammering a wild, erratic rhythm against her ribs that she has never experienced in all her years of academic rule. The ice she wears as armor begins to melt from the inside, replaced by a sudden, terrifying rush of heat that threatens to burn her carefully controlled world to ash. The violent fury of an early autumn nor'easter hammers relentlessly against the historic stained-glass windows of St. Jude Academy, turning the sprawling New England campus into a blurred, weeping landscape of lashing rain and deep shadows. Inside the sprawling library wing, the storm turns catastrophic when a massive bolt of lightning strikes a nearby substation, instantly plunging the entire historic estate and archive into absolute, suffocating darkness. Deep within the Academy's labyrinthine basement levels, a restricted labyrinth of centuries-old ledges, vaulted stone ceilings, and confidential board ledgers, Diana and Rose find themselves entirely cut off. They had descended earlier to audit structural property deeds, But the sudden power outage locked the heavy biometric security doors shut, jamming the electronic bolts with finality. There is no cellular signal, no auxiliary power, and no escape. The emergency backup system kicks in with a pathetic, flickering hum, casting a single, sickly amber pool of light from a solitary wall-mounted lamp that paints long, skeletal shadows across towering shelves of leather-bound records. For over an hour, they have worked in tense, agitated silence, separated by the physical weight of their hostility. But the oppressive cold of the stone basement, combined with the absolute isolation, begins to crack the heavy atmosphere. Diana stands by a heavy mahogany reading table, her sharp shoulders rigid under her tailored grey blazer. Her platinum blonde hair has loosened from its severe chignon, stray strands clinging to her damp temples, and her fingers tremble slightly as she traces the edge of a confidential ledger. She has spent her entire adult life wearing an impenetrable iron mask of authority, but the crushing weight of what she carries has finally pushed her to the absolute breaking point. Rose, leaning against a nearby stone pillar in her battered leather jacket, watches her closely. The sharp, cynical smirk is gone, replaced by a sudden, quiet intensity as she tracks the visible tremor in the older woman's hands. "You're shaking, Diana." Rose's voice is remarkably soft, completely stripped of its usual mocking edge, echoing low and steady against the vaulted stone walls. Diana stops. She doesn't turn around immediately, keeping her gaze fixed on the dark desk. When she finally lifts her head, the icy, unyielding rector of St. Jude Academy is completely gone, replaced by a woman who looks profoundly exhausted, profoundly lonely, and utterly terrified. "You think I enjoy playing the tyrant, Rose?" Diana's voice is a fragile, broken whisper, cracking slightly in the quiet air. "You think my strictness, the public reprimands, the endless demands for perfection, you think that was born from a desire to control you?" Rose pushes away from the pillar, taking a slow, deliberate step closer to the edge of the amber light. "Then why? Every single day you treat me like an inmate in a high-security prison. If you hate my presence this much, why not just let me burn out?" Diana turns to face her, her gray eyes shimmering with unshed tears under the flickering light. The vulnerability is raw, exposed, and completely agonizing. "Because the Board of Trustees doesn't just want to discipline you. They want to destroy our family name and strip away every remaining asset we own," Diana confesses, her voice thick with suppressed grief. "The moment our father passed away, the council began drafting a hostile takeover of the entire estate, using your academic infractions as a legal weapon to declare our lineage incompetent. Every time I publicly disciplined you, every time I locked you in my office or forced you to recertify your standing, I was building an iron shield around you. I had to prove to them that you were under my absolute control, so they would never look close enough to see the real target." The silence that follows is heavier than the stone walls surrounding them. Rose freezes, the gravity of the confession crashing over her with staggering clarity. All the anger, the bitter defiance, and the midnight standoffs suddenly recontextualize into a devastating truth. Diana hasn't been her jailer at all. She has been a solitary soldier, standing alone, against an entire corporate wolves' den, bearing the agonizing burden of protecting them both, while pretending to be the monster. A wave of profound, overwhelming empathy washes away every remaining wall between them. Rose steps directly into the amber circle of light, closing the distance until she is standing right in front of Diana. She doesn't mock her or offer empty reassurances. Instead, she reaches out, her warm, ink-stained fingers gently touching Diana's cold, trembling hands resting on the edge of the table. You've been carrying this entire war all by yourself, haven't you? Rose whispers, her dark eyes locking onto Diana's with an absolute fierce devotion. Diana looks down at their joined hands, a single tear finally escaping to trace a slow path down her cheek. In the dim, flickering glow of the emergency lamp, they stop looking at each other as stern authority and rebellious student, recognizing in one another the only true ally left in a corrupt world. The heavy, weathered doors of the abandoned West Archive wing remain permanently locked from the inside, sealing off a forgotten sanctuary of dusty floorboards and towering, shadow-draped bookshelves from the rest of the historic academy. Outside, the deep, velvet hours of the New England night stretch endlessly across the misty campus, but inside the archive, the air is thick, electric, and charged with an intense, unyielding focus. For weeks, the hostility that once pitted them against each other has forged an unbreakable, dangerous alliance. Gone are the public reprimands, the cold hallway standoffs, and the rigid disciplinary walls. In their place is a volatile, secret partnership fueled by a common mission, dismantling the corrupt board of trustees once and for all. The archive is illuminated by a single, industrial desk lamp, casting a warm, amber pool of light across a large oak table buried under a chaotic avalanche of financial audits, embezzled fund receipts, bank transfer logs, and encrypted corporate blueprints that Rose's underground contacts unearthed. They work in close quarters, their movements synchronized and breathless. It is well past 3 a.m. Diana stands by the table, leaning over a complex corporate flowchart with a tired sigh, rubbing her temples as the exhaustion begins to blur the figures on the page. She has discarded her structured suit jacket, wearing only a pristine silk button-down, her platinum blonde hair slightly disheveled from hours of running her fingers through it. Rose sits on the edge of the heavy oak desk, her boots dangling, wearing her signature battered leather jacket over a faded t-shirt. She reaches across the papers to slide a crucial document into Diana's line of sight. "Look at this signature, Diana," Rose murmurs, her voice low and husky in the quiet room. "This matches the exact shell company the head trustee used to funnel our family trust dividends out of the country 3 months after our father's passing." Diana looks down at the paper, but instead of focusing on the text, her gaze drifts upward, locking onto Rose's face. For weeks, the tension between them has been building like a dormant fault line beneath their feet, a volatile friction born of shared secrets, late-night strategy sessions, and an undeniable magnetic pull that defies every boundary of logic, status, and family law. Without a word, Diana straightens up. She moves with a sudden, deliberate intensity that makes Rose's breath hitch. Before Rose can react, Diana steps directly into her space. With an unyielding, commanding strength, she grabs the edges of the desk on either side of Rose's hips, leaning forward until her body cages the younger girl against the dark wood. The air in the archive instantly turns scorching hot. The scent of expensive French perfume blends with the sharp, earthy scent of leather and rain clinging to Rose's jacket. Rose doesn't flinch. Her dark eyes flash with a wild, dangerous fire, meeting Diana's intense gray gaze without a single ounce of hesitation. Her heart hammers against her ribs, echoing the rhythm of a silent countdown. "Diana," Rose whispers, her voice dropping to a breathless challenge as her hands instinctively come up to rest lightly against Diana's silk-draped shoulders. "What are you doing?" Diana's breath shudders, her cool facade completely shattering under the weight of an all-consuming desire she has fought to suppress for months. Her fingers tighten on the edge of the mahogany desk, her knuckles turning white. "We are playing with absolute fire, Rose." Diana's voice is a raw, trembling rasp, vibrating right against Rose's skin. If we cross this line, it will burn down everything we've built. There's no turning back. It will destroy us both. A slow, breathtakingly reckless smile spreads across Rose's lips. She doesn't back down an inch. Instead, she arches slightly forward, closing the microscopic gap between them, her dark eyes burning with absolute defiance. "Then let it burn," Rose whispers back, her voice an unyielding vow. Diana loses the last remnants of her restraint. Yielding entirely to Vijinomu Patoku intoxicating pull, she crashes her lips down onto Rose's in a deep, fierce, and utterly consuming kiss that obliterates every rule, every title, and every boundary they were ever given. The grand auditorium of St. Jude Academy is packed to absolute suffocation. Velvet-draped rows are filled with influential alumni, wealthy donors, international press, and every member of the corrupt board of trustees sitting smugly in the front tiers, anticipating the formal ratification of their corporate takeover. At the center of the elevated mahogany stage stands Diana Morgan. She looks every bit the untouchable, flawless rector. Her charcoal gray bespoke suit is immaculate. Her platinum blonde hair is pulled back into a severe, perfect chignon, and her expression is a mask of cool, professional detachment. But beneath her structured cuffs, her pulse races with a dangerous, exhilarating tension. Seated just off stage near the media control console is Rose. Wearing her battered leather jacket over a clean, dark shirt, her dark curls tumbling freely, she rests her fingers casually over the master digital override switch, her eyes locking onto Diana with a silent, fierce vote of confidence. The head of the board, a silver-haired titan of industry, steps up to the central podium, tapping the microphone with a self-satisfied smirk. "Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests," the chairman's voice booms smoothly through the hall. "Today marks a historic transition for St. Jude Academy. We are officially moving to consolidate the campus assets and restructure our institutional governance under private equity control." Before he can utter another syllable, Diana steps forward, cutting him off with a single sharp motion of her hand. She doesn't take the podium mic. Instead, she presses a button on her remote console. Instantly, the massive projection screen behind the board transforms. Gone are the corporate charts. In their place flash thousands of confidential banking records, encrypted wire transfers, offshore shell company deeds, and recorded audio confessions detailing years of systemic embezzlement, asset stripping, and financial fraud orchestrated by the board itself to steal the family's legacy. A collective, deafening gasp rips through the packed auditorium. Camera shutters explode in a blinding, chaotic staccato of flashbulbs as reporters surge forward, microphones thrusting into the aisles, while the trustees turn chalk white, screaming in panicked denial. Diana's voice cuts through the roaring chaos like crystal glass, sharp and absolute. "Your fraudulent control of this institution ends today. Every illicit contract is null and void." Before security or the disgraced board members can recover from the shock, Rose slips out from the tech booth, marching straight onto the stage to stand shoulder to shoulder with Diana. The flashbulbs blind them, but they do not flinch. With absolute defiance, Diana and Rose turn their backs on the collapsing council, walking hand in hand off the stage and straight out of the grand hall. They don't look back, dashing through the historic oak doors into the courtyard as a heavy, torrential New England downpour begins to thrash the campus. They leap into the low-slung cabin of a waiting sports car. As the engine roars to life and the tires tear away from the academy gates under a sky split by jagged lightning and deafening thunder, Diana pulls the car to a sudden halt at the edge of the foggy wooded road. Turning to face Rose in the dim light of the dashboard, she tangles her fingers deep into the younger woman's wet curls, pulling her close. With the rain pounding mercilessly against the roof, and thunder shaking the earth beneath them, Diana crashes her lips down onto Rose's in a deep, fierce, and utterly consuming kiss. A final, breathtaking surrender that obliterates every boundary of the past forever.